guilty on 5 of 6 charges, a jury reaching a verdict in the month-long, closely watched sex trafficking trial of Ghislaine Maxwell. The former girlfriend of financier Jeffrey Epstein now faces years in prison. The jury convicted her of luring teenage girls for Epstein to sexually abuse, the victims as young as 14 years old. Epstein was convicted of sex crimes in Florida before his death in 2019. You can see each of the federal counts that prosecutors had charged her with. Prosecutors called a total of 24 witnesses to the stand. That includes 4 women who say Maxwell and Epstein targeted them. Maxwell faces up to 65 years in prison. We don't yet have a sentencing date. Attorney Andrew Lieb is back with us tonight. And Andrew, as we look at that graphic of what charges she was convicted of and what she is found not guilty of, you see that enticement of a minor to travel to engage in illegal sex acts was not guilty. What does that mean? What would prosecutors have to have proven for the jury to say she was guilty there?
Well, just to be clarifying, there was actually 2 charges of that enticement, and one of them was acquitted and one was guilty. So it depends on exactly the subdivision they were going over in the United States Code. But, James, what they're really saying there is not actually that the prostitution or sex act happened, but that she was being enticed by means of wire or telephone or interstate travel or communications to come and do this overt sex act. And that's differentiated from the other charge of sex trafficking. So one was found guilty on enticing, one was not.
And she also had these charges of actually transporting these girls for these sex acts with Jeffrey Epstein and of sex trafficking itself. So the enticement sort of falls to the background there. It would seem to observers of this case that we wouldn't be here, Andrew, without some pretty striking investigative reporting and testimony of the victims who spoke with the reporter who started to spearhead this a few years ago. What has the way this played out taught us about our justice system, that it left those victims behind without justice until those reports started to come out? What do we take from that going forward?
Well, you said it right, and I hope everyone realizes these are acts that occurred from 1994 to 2004, some years ago. And these girls, now they're women, but at the point in time that it happened, 14 years old, 16 years old, 17 years old, and the key one was the sex trafficking. There was conspiracy involved as well, but the big kahuna was the sex trafficking. And as you said, so many women and children, and men too, are left behind. And I want to give a shout out to my state of New York, who 2 years ago passed the New York Child Victims Act, which allows sex victims up to the age of 55 to speak up and sue and get compensated for being sex victims. Because all too often, even 18, 19, 20, 21, you're so traumatized for what happened to you that it takes so much therapy to speak up and say you were wronged.
And we saw this, too, in the Catholic Church scandal of kids who were abused and who tried to go back and see some kind of justice for that and ran into similar roadblocks. And you're right to point out that kind of legislation that's needed to open those doors again. And it would seem that there's now precedent for that going forward. Obviously, sentencing is next for Maxwell, but for this case overall, what kind of groundwork have we laid here? Because there are now women who will carry these scars with them for the rest of their lives. But maybe, Andrew, there's some kind of justice now to be had, and not just for them, but for other victims.
James, you said it right. One justice spurs more justice, which spurs more justice. It snowballs. There's confidence that breeds confidence when people are, I don't want to say heard, but when people are respected for what bad things happen to them, other people hear what happened and they speak up as well. We see that in sexual harassment, in discrimination, as we see it in this sex trafficking, which is the biggest tragedy of them all. So what we see is that this conversation is going to spur other women and girls to speak up. Unfortunately, because it's a federal case, the cameras weren't allowed in the courtroom. But people like you and I, we're letting everyone know that victims do have a voice. Prosecutors will speak for you, and you can hire private attorneys to sue for civil compensation. You have rights.
Martin Luther King liked to say, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Maybe justice here is a threat to injustice. everywhere. Andrew, it's great to talk to you as always, and I really appreciate you spending some time with us tonight. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.